Hey everyone, it's JC for Ink on 3. So it's nearly Christmas and I have 0 cards to give to my friends. Show of hands for all my procrastinators. I get it, we've all got other obligations. Maybe you've got to cook, you have kids and family you're hosting for, or in my case, your full-time job just gets in the way of your crafting time. So today I'll show you a few of the ways I try to stay efficient when making a stack of cards, and they don't necessarily have to be holiday themed cards. I'm showcasing the Ink on 3 Atelier Fusion Ink watercolor refills today, and I've got these high quality pigments linked below. The first thing I'm going to grab is this economical watercolor paper from Canson in the XL series that's 9 inches by 12 inches. I have a mister bottle off to the side and I will pre-wet the paper liberally with some clean water and use a large paddle type watercolor brush to distribute the water all the way around. Then while the paper is wet, I grabbed adjacent colors on the color wheel using Ink on 3 Atelier Fusion Ink watercolor refills. I shook these liberally off camera and applied the pigment directly to the watercolor paper. In this first example, I used Peacock Blue and Goddess Green. I put Goddess Green down in the center of the wet watercolor paper and blended the pigment toward the opposite ends of the paper. Then I put a strip of Peacock Blue and repeated the ink blending for a gradient across the watercolor paper. In order to achieve intense color saturation, I used a heat tool and dried the paper completely before applying another layer of the 2 ink colors. So my first tip for mass production, you'll notice that I do all of the same step of the card making process at the same time. I'm making all my gradient backgrounds first before moving on to the next step. You can make this easier on yourself by making multiple panels using the same color blend, but in this case I wanted to play around with the Atelier inks, so I made a second blend with Maryland Red and Mandarin Orange, following the same steps as previously mentioned, followed by a black gradient with Painted Black. Now I've set these 3 panels off to the side to let them dry. Dry times are perfect opportunities in mass production to work on other things, so in this case I'll take the time to work on die cuts. While quickly pre-planning these cards, I knew I wanted 3 snowflakes per card, and in the end I knew I was going to end up with 12 complete cards. So I used 6 snowflake dies and 6 panels of white cardstock to make a total of 36 snowflakes. To help with the mass production of die cuts, I used Glad Press and Seal to hold all the dies at once after I arranged them in a way so that they fit on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of white cardstock. This will help me pick up all the dies at once and eliminate the need to rearrange the dies on another piece of cardstock. While shopping your stash for dies, I would recommend you use a die that isn't too intricate, as intricate dies tend to hold onto paper, thus holding the little time you have. By the end of the die cutting phase, the watercolor gradient should have fully dried by now. Off camera, I've already trimmed down the gradient panels to 4 1/2 by 6 to give me 4 equal panels. This will give me a perfect opportunity to hide a few gradient mistakes and add white splatters to the panels. I'm using an opaque white pigment ink and Ink on 3 small tip water brush to add a gradient of white splatters to 4 panels simultaneously. I'll do this for the green, blue, and black gradients as well. And again, while these are drying, I'll return to the snowflakes. What I wanted to do with a few of the snowflakes was create thick snowflake embellishments using layers of heat embossing. In order to achieve this, I took strips of scrap cardstock with double-sided adhesive running lengthwise and adhered the snowflakes to my paddle. Now what I have is a snowflake tree. I'll use Ink on 3 Juicy Embossing ink and an Ink on 3 embossing powder, in this case strawberry champagne, to create chipboard-like snowflakes for my cards. So I'll smoosh the embossing ink pad directly onto the snowflake tree I created and immediately apply embossing powder to the sticky ink. I'll grab my embossing heat tool and heat set the embossing powder until nice and shiny. In order for the chipboard sticker-like effect to work, I had to repeat the ink smooshing and embossing powder steps 2 more times for a total of 3 layers. I also used Arctic White and Gold Rush on different snowflake trees to achieve the same effect. Okay, so we are almost done. I'm taking a small panel of white cardstock to stamp my sentiment. In order to help with mass production, I'm picking a sentiment that can be cut into sentiment strips or a stamp that has a fairly uniform height. This season's greeting stamp from the Oh Dear stamp set works perfectly for my holiday cards. What I'm doing is following the ruler on my original Misty to create even spacing between the stamped sentiments. In my case, once I stamp the season's greeting sentiment in black detail ink from Ink on 3, I can move the paper up half an inch and stamp again. I'll keep repeating this process until I run out of paper for a total of 12 sentiment strips. Now to cut these out, I'll follow the same half-inch process in my paper trimmer, and I'll end up with beautifully spaced sentiment strips. Okay, so here are all my elements to my card. I already have pre-folded A2 sized card bases, my trimmed watercolor background cut to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, the snowflakes, and the sentiment strip. Like I said earlier in this video, it is easier to do all of one step at the same time, so I glue down all of the gradient panels to my pre-folded card bases off camera. Then I will glue down all the snowflakes, followed by the sentiment strip. Now I have 12 cards fanned out here. To make these look a little less uniform, I'm going to take these packs of sequins that I never use and heavily embellish these cards. Basically, I'm using the sequins to fill in the spaces between the snowflakes and make them look less cookie cutter and more unique. You can make this go by faster by applying liquid glue to 4 panels at once. Then while the glue is getting tacky, apply sequins to the glue. And that's it. It took me a total of 4 working hours to make 12 cards. Honestly, that's pretty miraculous considering that it usually takes me 2 hours to make 1 card most times. Do you all have other tips and tricks for mass producing cards? Make sure you share them in the comments below. If this is your first time to my channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with your crafty friends. I'll talk to you all very soon, and have the best holiday.